For decades, the world believed the global economy was stable. Governments kept borrowing, banks kept lending, consumers kept spending money they didn't have. Everything looked normal on the surface, but beneath it, pressure was building. In 2024, inflation surged to levels not seen in generations. Debt reached historic highs across every major nation. Central banks scrambled to keep the system alive, printing money faster than ever. But each solution created a bigger problem. We weren't fixing the system, we were stretching it. And by 2030, economists began warning that the entire financial architecture was approaching a breaking point, a point where the old rules would collapse and a new era would begin. They called it the wealth reset, a moment where debt, currency, and global power would be rewritten, not by choice, but by necessity, a transformation too big to ignore and too unstoppable to prevent. Throughout the 2020s, inflation was sold as temporary, a short-term inconvenience, a passing storm. But year after year, prices continued to rise, not because of supply issues, but because of structural decay. Wages could not keep up. Essential goods became luxuries. The cost of living soared while real incomes stagnated. Ordinary families found themselves trapped in a financial squeeze that never loosened. Governments blamed external shocks, pandemics, wars, supply chains. But the truth was simpler. They had printed too much money for too long. And once inflation enters an economy at that scale, it becomes permanent, a built-in feature of a system that can no longer sustain itself. By 2030, the world realized inflation was not an error. It was a warning, a signal that the old monetary order was dying, and a new one was about to emerge. Debt is the foundation of modern economies. Nations borrow to function. Corporations borrow to expand. Families borrow to survive. But between 2008 and 2030, global debt tripled. Governments issued bonds faster than markets could absorb. Central banks purchased trillions in assets to keep everything afloat. The numbers became so large they lost meaning. Debt grew far faster than economic output, wages, or productivity. Economies were expanding, but only on paper. The real world was running on borrowed time. And the more debt nations took on, the harder it became to escape. By 2030, economists agreed the system was mathematically impossible to sustain. Something had to give. And history shows that when debt reaches this magnitude, it never gets paid back. It gets reset. While the debt crisis deepened, another transformation was quietly unfolding. Central banks around the world began developing digital national currencies, programmable money, trackable money, money that could be created or erased with a single decision. China launched its digital yuan first, Europe followed, then the United States. By 2029, nearly every major economy had adopted a central bank digital currency, or CBDC. These currencies promised efficiency, security, and speed, but they also granted governments unprecedented power. Control over transactions, instant taxation, real-time monitoring of every dollar spent, and the ability to restructure the entire monetary system overnight. As inflation worsened and debt spiraled, these digital currencies became the perfect tool for a reset, a way to redesign wealth without touching physical money. A silent revolution disguised as modernization. Every economic reset in history involves one thing: the redistribution of wealth. In the 1930s, it came through bank failures. In the 1970s, through inflation. In 2008, through market bailouts. But the 2030 wealth reset is different. This time, the scale is global, and the mechanisms are digital. Governments begin converting old currencies into new digital units. Debts are restructured, some reduced, others erased. Savings accounts lose value through conversion ratios. Large investors see their assets revalued, and ordinary citizens, as always, shoulder the burden quietly. The reset doesn't happen in a single day. It happens gradually, through policy shifts, currency reforms, and digital transitions. By the time people realize what is happening, their wealth has already changed shape, not lost, but reset. The old economy was built on predictable rules. Banks lent money, people worked jobs, governments collected taxes. But automation, debt, and technological disruption rewrote those rules. Millions of jobs disappeared as machines replaced human labor. Entire industries shrank while new digital ones exploded. Tax bases declined, government spending increased, and the gap between rich and poor widened to its largest point in modern history. The old economy simply could not support the world it created. By 2030, the structure that once held everything together, derbichi, wages, savings, home ownership, retirement, began to fracture. People worked more but owned less. They earned more but saved nothing. They consumed more but built no wealth. This collapse was not sudden, it was gradual, invisible, inevitable. The system didn't fall in one day. It faded into a new reality. The reset leads to a new hierarchy of wealth. Nations with strong resources gain power. Nations dependent on debt lose influence. Digital currencies dominate global trade. Energy-producing countries rise in value. Commodity-backed alliances form new financial blocks. The US dollar loses its absolute dominance, replaced by a world of multiple competing currencies. Financial markets adapt to new rules, new policies, new controls. Corporations pivot to automation-driven productivity. Banks shift to digital lending and real-time settlements. Wealth no longer flows through the old channels. It moves through networks, algorithms, and sovereign digital systems. This new order is efficient, but it is also more controlled, more monitored, and more centralized than ever before. Freedom and stability trade places, and the world enters a financial era unlike anything before it. Every reset leads to a choice, a fork in the road. One path leads to a world where digital systems bring efficiency, fairness, and stability, where economies rebuild on sustainable foundations, where debt no longer spirals unchecked. The other path leads to something darker, a world of surveillance finance, programmable wealth, restricted spending, governments with the power to approve or deny transactions. A society where financial freedom is conditional, granted only to those who follow the rules. The future of wealth is not predetermined. It depends on people, policies, and global cooperation. The reset is coming, but what emerges afterward is still unwritten. Economists say resets are not catastrophes. They are corrections, necessary adjustments when systems become unsustainable. But every correction has winners and losers. Every reset shifts power from one class to another. The question is not whether the 2030 wealth reset will happen. The numbers make it unavoidable. The real question is simple: who will be prepared? Those who adapt early may rise with the new system. Those who cling to the old one may lose everything. The world is entering a decade of transformation, a decade that will redefine money, ownership, and financial survival. And when the reset arrives, the era of the old economy will end. The most devastating part of the wealth reset won't be the fall of currencies, but the slow disappearance of paper wealth that millions believe is real. Savings accounts will shrink in value even as the numbers stay the same, creating an illusion of stability while purchasing power quietly evaporates. Pension funds will struggle to meet decades-old promises in a world where returns no longer match inflation, forcing retirees into part-time work just to afford basic necessities. Real estate markets will split into two extreme categories: high-end assets owned by elites and institutions, and collapsing properties in shrinking middle-class neighborhoods abandoned by banks. Stock markets will become increasingly volatile as corporations take on more debt, propping up their share price while hollowing out their core operations. But the most shocking revelation will be the truth that wealth stored in digits, not assets, can disappear with a single policy decision. Central banks will begin redefining what money means, transitioning billions from physical savings into programmable digital currencies, and each step will tighten their control over where wealth sits and who truly owns it in this new economic architecture. As nations embrace digital money, a new type of financial control emerges: quiet, seamless, invisible, and total. Purchases can be tracked in real time, spending limits can be adjusted based on economic conditions, and citizens can be incentivized or punished for following or resisting government financial directives. This shift will be sold as safety, efficiency, and economic modernization, masking the deeper purpose behind it: to manage populations during the turbulent years of the reset. Debt forgiveness programs may come packaged with restrictions, offering relief in exchange for compliance with new rules. Universal basic income will expand, but tied to digital wallets that expire monthly to force economic circulation and prevent saving. And quietly, governments will gain the power to freeze, tax, redirect, or limit funds instantly, ending centuries of financial privacy and turning money into a tool of policy enforcement rather than personal freedom. The workforce of 2030 will look nothing like the one of the past. Industries we consider foundational, banking, retail, transportation, customer service, accounting, logistics, will shrink dramatically under the force of automation. AI-driven companies will operate faster, cheaper, and more efficiently than any human workforce. This shift will not be sudden, but a quiet erosion of opportunity that people notice too late. Millions will compete for fewer roles, while companies invest in machines that work 24/7 without breaks, salaries, or complaints. Governments will attempt to intervene with training programs, but most workers will find that new skills cannot keep up with the speed at which technology evolves. The middle class, once defined by stable work, will slowly dissolve into a polarized society of ultra-high earners, controlling the digital economy, and low-wage workers struggling to stay afloat. It will be the most significant transformation of labor since the Industrial Revolution, but far more permanent. As governments weaken under debt and inflation, corporations begin filling the power vacuum. Tech giants expand into healthcare, education, food distribution, and even public infrastructure, controlling essential services once managed by the state. Housing will be increasingly owned by institutional investors, turning millions of families into lifelong renters who depend on corporate landlords for shelter. Private security firms will replace police in certain districts, and subscription-based services will replace public utilities. In this world, citizenship matters less than customer status. Access to opportunities, resources, and even basic necessities will be determined by algorithms measuring risk, value, and profitability. Loyalty programs will become modern ration cards, rewarding consumers for staying within the approved digital ecosystem. And slowly, the power of elected governments will shift into the hands of boards, shareholders, and multinational conglomerates that operate beyond borders and outside democratic oversight. Separations between countries will matter less in the 2030 reset. International alliances will merge financial systems to create stability during the transition to a new global economy. Currency unions will expand. Blockchain settlement networks will replace traditional banking, and central banks will synchronize policies to prevent local collapses from triggering worldwide contagion. This integration will reduce volatility, but concentrate power in a small number of global institutions that oversee the flow of money, data, and trade. Developing nations will become heavily dependent on digital infrastructure provided by superpowers, giving stronger nations unprecedented influence over the internal affairs of weaker ones. Meanwhile, corporations will operate across borders with more ease than citizens can move between cities. The world will look more unified on the surface, but beneath it lies a hierarchy where financial power determines sovereignty itself. Traditional elites, bankers, politicians, old money families will fight desperately to maintain their influence during the reset. Many will attempt to convert their wealth into scarce, non-digital assets: land, gold, infrastructure, even water rights and farmland. Some will partner with tech giants to protect their relevance, while others will lobby governments to slow the transition to digital control systems. But the new power structure emerging is built on algorithms, data, and real-time monitoring, a world where old institutions hold less sway. Private wealth will mean less than network control, and political influence will be overshadowed by technological dominance. Some old elites will adapt, but many will fade quietly into historical memory, replaced by a new generation of digital titans who own the platforms through which all modern life flows. By 2030, the wealth reset reaches its final phase, a world transformed by debt restructuring, digital currencies, automated workforces, and corporate governance. The new elites control infrastructure, data, and global markets through decentralized networks and AI-driven systems. The middle class exists only in pockets, held up by government incentives and digital subsidies. The vast majority of global citizens live within tightly managed economic ecosystems where money flows through approved channels and opportunities are allocated algorithmically. The wealthy are no longer simply rich, they are system controllers, shaping nations without ever running for office. And the poor are no longer just poor. They are financially monitored, digitally dependent, and economically replaceable. This is the new reality forged by the reset, a world where survival depends not on hard work, but on navigating a system that rewards compliance and punishes independence.